Last week marks the first time that the World Economic Forum has come together for a meeting since the pandemic has started, with over 400 sessions and 2,500 leaders around the world, from prime ministers, presidents, and cabinet leaders that apparently been penetrated by Klaus Schwab.
We penetrate the cabinets.
This year's theme, History at Turning Point, Government Policies and Business Strategies. The meeting spanned just under 5 days to talk about how countries all around the world should change its government and business policies because, well, Emperor Klaus Schwab said so. And you don't want to disobey Emperor Klaus Schwab. So for those that need a bit of a catching up, the World Economic Forum is the catalyst behind the movement called the Great Reset. The central theme of the Great Reset can pretty much be summed up with a simple phrase they use: you will own nothing and you will be happy. And this same group just met again for the first time in person to discuss how to bring the entire world closer to their goals and agenda. And what's unsettling about all this is that the entire event revolves around this one man, Klaus Schwab, who is an unelected, self-appointed leader who spent his entire life building influence over presidents and prime ministers all around the world, aka penetrating the cabinets. And as our research team and I tuned in to this year's World Economic Forum event, we found key moments that unveiled another piece to their agenda puzzle. The meeting starts with Schwab's opening remarks saying that the meeting has 4 focuses this year. First, the war in Ukraine, which really was just sessions on top of sessions, talking about how terrible Putin is. Second, Schwab wants to reinforce the countries around the world to build resiliency for perhaps a new virus. Third, the focus is also on the issue of climate change and how businesses and governments need to take more action on the matter. And lastly, poverty and hunger. Very noble. And of course, he concludes his remark thanking all government and business leaders for their loyalty.
But I want to thank you also, our partners. You have kept your loyalty to the forum.
One thing that stood out to me the most is something that Darth Klaus Schwab said on minute 11:22. Let's play the clip.
The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world, to make progress related to specific issues on the global agenda.
So what is this future that Klaus Schwab wants to build? And that is what we're going to unpack from the 400 plus sessions during the World Economic Forum. And we first have to start with our freedom of speech. Now, right out of the gate, in one of the sessions named Ushering in a Safer Digital Future, one of the panelists calls for a recalibration of our freedom of speech. Just hear this.
We are finding ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online, you know, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, you know, to be free from online violence, or the right of data protection to the right to child dignity.
So isn't freedom of speech just an unalienable right? Isn't free speech just free speech? So what the World Economic Forum is really saying is that they want to take something that is an unalienable right of yours and change it to their version of quote unquote better. And just to demonstrate how much the World Economic Forum loves freedom of speech, a contributing reporter for the Turning Point USA was there at Davos last week and got frisked by now known as the World Economic Forum police. So according to multiple sources, what sounds like a squad of armed police came to frisk the contributors for the Turning Point USA, checked their IDs, their papers, and was even detained and demanded to see video footages that the journalists filmed, even demanding that they turn over the memory cards they used to film the videos. Now, what's ironic about all this is that on the last day of the World Economic Forum event, they had an entire session dedicated to protecting journalists around the world. Even one panelist pointed out journalists are being suppressed by the laws of their own country. Just listen to this.
The law, the weaponization of the law in other ways to restrict press freedom. Could you speak to that threat,
Sure.
please?
Maria Ressa, that introduced that panel, is a typical example of a government using every single legal mechanisms to silence a journalist, to instill and create fear within the journalistic community. I think she has more than more than 60 lawsuits against her.
So which is it? Does the World Economic Forum actually want freedom of press and speech? Or do they not? This kind of paradox only leads me to believe that the World Economic Forum wants freedom of press for journalists that speak well of their agenda. But is that really journalism? So my ultimate question is this. If the World Economic Forum loves the freedom of speech so much, why are they afraid of the reporters? Is it because these reporters are spreading dissent, misinformation? Or maybe these reporters didn't smell like the elitists like the rest of them. And it all makes sense now. Joe Biden is a self-proclaimed ally of the World Economic Forum. And it's pretty obvious at this point that the World Economic Forum is not a pro-freedom of speech movement. Because if they weren't, Biden wouldn't have thought to start a Ministry of Truth, quote unquote, that was paused literally 2 weeks after, which certainly gave me a glimmer of hope that the freedom of speech is still a top priority here in the United States. And this is why the World Economic Forum is pushing for a digital metaverse world, because in such worlds, there is an arbiter who can control what you can say, what you can't say, where you're allowed to go, and who you're allowed to meet. And this idea is confirmed by the same panelists from the session.
We need the companies assessing their risks and then building the protections in as a forethought rather than an afterthought. If you will, embedding those digital seatbelts and erecting those digital guardrails.
In fact, the metaverse is such a huge importance to the World Economic Forum that they dedicated an entire hour and 24-minute session about it. So important that they want to go after your children to get them on the metaverse as much as possible. Just listen to this.
One thing I am really focused on is that it includes and incorporates very deliberately the perspectives of children as a vulnerable group in our society. And if we don't do that, then some of the mistakes of the past, some of the mistakes of Internet 2.0, where Internet platforms that haven't been designed with children in mind may be repeated.
So the World Economic Forum realized that they may not be able to sign you up for the metaverse, but they can certainly do that with your kids. And this is where it all boils down to. It's about data and privacy. Here's what the World Economic Forum confirms that they believe.
Data is a very interesting piece because there is personal data and there is a data of us as citizens. And I think the government and the country has a right on our data as citizens.
Government and country has right on our data as citizens. Right. Another highlight from this year's World Economic Forum event has to do with central bank digital currency, or CBDC for short. A CBDC is a type of a digital currency, but unlike a decentralized version of it like Bitcoin, XRP, or Ethereum, a CBDC is offered by a centralized government so that it can control and monitor all transactions. And the goal for the CBDC is to replace our fiat paper currency like our dollar. Now, if you're new to the idea of a CBDC and why it could pose as a threat, not only can our government control and monitor our transactions, but they can even freeze transactions, make our CBDC money go to zero, or even set an expiration date on our money with a click of a button if we don't buy into their agenda. So in this year's World Economic Forum meeting, a conversation took place about how to advance and roll out a CBDC around the world even faster. In fact, one panelist of the discussion was Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF for short. And she admits that the rollout of the CBDC around the world is happening very quickly, and the IMF has to embrace it. Just take a look at this.
The largest universe of a pilot, which actually made me wake up and say, well, this thing is moving so fast that the International Monetary Fund has to embrace it. China with a pilot with 128 million participants.
And for those that aren't really clear about what the IMF does, the IMF in a nutshell is like an international bank for countries. They would often lend money to countries with specific conditions, and one of those conditions might include restructuring government monetary policies or changing the laws to make the country more open to the global economy. Basically, the IMF gives money to countries in exchange of changing policies or laws of that of the country. Sounds like the World Economic Forum to me. But interestingly, in the next minute, Ms. Georgieva goes on to say that decentralized currency like Bitcoin cannot be real money. Just take a look at this.
When we say, I always get upset and then I get occasional hate tweets, when I say that Bitcoin may be called coin, but it's not money. Why? Because a prerequisite for something to be money is to be a stable store of value. So you actually can plan around it.
So clearly, she doesn't like the idea of decentralization and discourages countries from adopting it.
When the first country embraced Bitcoin, and I was asked, what did we think at the fund? I said, well, it's a sovereign decision. Doesn't make it a good decision.
So there we have it. The managing director of the IMF just took a mad doo-doo Amber Heard style on decentralized currency where governments cannot control. Fascinating. Oh, and the World Economic Forum just confirmed that they want an internationalized CBDC, basically a one world currency.
What we do not yet have is international settlement based on CBDCs.
Right.
CBDCs are not yet internationalized. But this is where the potential to cut cost of remittances.
Ultimately, we may see a more aggressive advancement of the central bank digital currency as the IMF steps up to influence the countries around the world. So why does this matter to all of us? Well, for one, many of our own senators and Congress members here in the United States are part of the World Economic Forum. And if you ever wonder where these wacky ideas come from, well, you kind of know where it comes from now. Even more, Joe Biden, the self-proclaimed good friends with Emperor Klaus Schwab, got his entire Build Back Better agenda from the World Economic Forum. The ideas and agenda where it comes to taxation, environment, and our small businesses, even our freedom of speech, all a construct of the World Economic Forum. So everything that goes inside of the World Economic Forum will impact us in our future. In a nutshell, the World Economic Forum is a meeting of the elitists and world leaders to share ideas on what they believe is best for all of us and the rest of the world. Many of these leaders are elected officials through the citizens of their respective country or shareholders of their respective corporations that they lead. Yet my question is, why aren't they doing more town hall meetings with us? Are they answerable to Klaus Schwab, or are they answerable to us, the citizens and the shareholders? I think it's a massive problem when conversations are being taken place about government and business policies without the everyday people given the voice and the freedom to stand for what they believe in and not what Klaus Schwab believes in. This isn't democracy, this is oligarchy. In fact, the World Economic Forum has a very specific goal to hit by 2030 to change your future when it comes to your freedom, our children, and even our money. So click on this video right here where I unpack all their goals to hit by 2030. It doesn't look good. So stay free and stay enlightened.